As it was making an approach to Martha's Vineyard Airport. Petty Officer Todd Burgun joins us from the Coast Guard base in Boston. He is a petty officer and a public information officer with us. Sir, what can you tell us about this last communication with JFK Jr.'s plane?
All I really know at this time is that it was at 9:39 p.m. and it was with the FAA, and it was. Have you ever wondered why we go to war? Or why you...
Candidates were appearing on late-night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process. And while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines, per se, hadn't.
I said, wait a minute, that's not why I called. I said, you have an end limitation that's been removed.
And so while you had all this interest on it that you could really could point to with statistics and facts, we thought, well, here's an opportunity to do a different kind of political magazine.
Didn't you want to
never seem to be able to get out of debt? Why there is poverty, division, and...
Well, I mean, one of the things that you sort of have to understand about this enterprise is that the opportunity to do an entrepreneurial venture, to really start to take a big risk, and to have an idea and see it through. And
sure, they and their friends were enriched to the fullest extent possible. A criminal president.
Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
Yes, Phil, I just heard your expertise aviation analysis of the MD-80 issue, but it gets beyond that field. Let me give you the greater details.
Were themselves about to be permanently eradicated from the earth? You might think that an idealistic fantasy.
Last night at around 10:15, my mother passed on. She was surrounded by...
In the summer of 1988, JFK Jr. addressed the Democratic...
Her friends and her family and her books and the people and the things that she loved.
Over a quarter century ago, my father stood before you to accept the nomination for the president.
One more time.
All I really know at this time is that it was at 9:39 p.m. and it was with the FAA, and it was on its final approach to Martha's Vineyard.
You ready?
Yep, go ahead.
The first thing I did was contact the
We acknowledge there are criminals, of course. They rob your house.
Director of Safety, Dave Robinson. Okay.
And, you know, I understand part of the, someone once said to me, you know, journalists are in the...
And he knew those engines were hung illegally, and they don't need certification.
Business of harvesting attention, and if that's what that does, then so be it. But it's not true.
Standards to be put in Part 121 Revenue Service. He knew that.
What if I told you there was a reason for it all? What if I told you it was done on purpose? What if I told you that those who were corrupting the world, poisoning our food, and igniting conflict...
And he lied to me. He says, well, they're operating normal now.
All right, listen one more time.
All I really know at this time is that it was at 9:39 p.m. and it was with the FAA, and it was on its final approach to Martha's Vineyard.
Has resurrected itself again. But what can Senator Thompson do now? I guess they
nothing.
Nothing.
Just not
kind of kick himself.
He looked sort of foolish there for a while,
right.
But
Elected as our leaders.
Come on, John. Don't come up to my girlfriend when she's on the beach alone and start taking photographs of her. No.
It was taken.
Night at around 10:15, my mother passed on. She was...
Results?
no.
That's on 44.
Okay.
Ulysses Grant says that James Garfield, they hated each other and they had correspondence back and forth. Garfield has shown that he's not possessed of the backbone of an angleworm. they had some good ones there.
Surrounded by her friends and her family and her books.
All right, listen one more time.
All I really know at this time is that it was at 9:39 p.m. and it was with the FAA, and it was on its final approach to Martha's Vineyard.
In Atlanta.
Over a quarter century ago, my father stood before you.
And the people and the things that you love.
That there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. certainly the way
she parented for both of them, and I think she was deliberate in ensuring that his interests and his concerns were part of.
Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing.
To accept the nomination for the presidency of the United States.
If a criminal became the president, imagine what they could achieve. They could use the full weight of their executive power to commit much larger crimes.
Come to our world, right, Field McConnell?
In perspective, the kinds of things that were passed over unremarked upon years ago, illegitimate children, you know, I think it's Grover Cleveland had a wife who was 30 years his younger. And
They not only hide
That's why I'm 95.
Crimes.
I don't think that I've seen as many of you in one place since they announced the results of my first bar exam.
Presidency of the United States.
from your checklist that's being used in your simulators as well. So every pilot, every tech airman who's in on this scam to put into revenue service.
I have a feeling that you're really asking me if it's true.
Part of the answer could be that.
Why don't I just dispense
with that off the bat and say it's absolutely not that we're running a magazine, and as you no doubt know, that's more than a full-time job.
Illegal jets are getting TC checks signed off at the FAA.
You are not a criminal. I'm not a criminal. So how
Fiscal POI at the time was Mike Monroe.
Could create alliances with other criminal presidents and then collaborate on more global criminal activities? Anything goes.
The marriage of publishing and politics, it simply weaves together two strands of my family's business.
Money, human trafficking, whatever makes the big bucks. The 20th century was turbulent with war, economic disaster, famines, and displacement. We have always accepted these things as just human nature, and simply the way the...
Well, Mike Monroe's got an interesting background. I think I gave accurate testimony to the Criminal Rescue of Social Security, which is Dr. Ted Powers.
world works. Something inevitable. And
at first he didn't believe me, and then when we met 2 weeks later, he was astonished of the corruption in aviation. Well,
this is where we were all tragically wrong.
I'll be back there in July, and I'll pass it then, or I'll pass it the next time, or I'll pass.
They became leaders of agricultural companies who have control over our food supply. Also big pharmaceutical companies. The one
of our upbringing, and some of her own, which were not his. And I think there was a dynamic there that was healthy.
Right.